Hello, it's time for another episode of the Thought Project. I decided to do today's show at the beach in preparation for the 4th of July. And I'm in my two piece, so hope you enjoy that. Today, we're going to start with some economics. There's some reports released that the U.S. gross domestic income contracted 1.8% first quarter of this year. And it was previously put at a 2.3% decline, but that's not correct. No. And then also the gross domestic product grew at 1.3% in the first quarter. Notably, there's been a number of articles that China is now having problems keeping up with manufacturing in their country, which is actually probably a benefit to other countries that might want to begin doing more manufacturing again. So just an FYI. And I'm looking at this. A source this week noted that President Biden's son Hunter has made a number of statements that were both resentful and strange, that he gave his dad a burner phone and he could reach him and be with him at any time, and had actually made phone calls with his father with him privately, which would actually be considered a threat, especially considering that, and I noted this, that President Biden seems to be suffering from neurocognitive issues. And it's especially noticeable that both Senator Grassley and Senator Johnson this last week stated that they wanted more information after the FBI probe around the Russian disinformation scheme. I lived in DC here for 19 years, and I went through a huge amount of just complete hell trying to get away from that couple, Cersei and Wilhelm, as I nicknamed them. And also dealing with the issues of Patricia, Kendrick, Buffalo Bill, and Dan. And it's notable that both Patricia and Buffalo Bill not only interfered with, and Dan also interfered with, government agencies around intelligence, but they also went out to Hollywood sets and beat up actresses and actors, and it was all in support of this bizarre agency that's been set up out in Hollywood. It's Russian. And the obfuscation around trying to protect that agency that the Russians engaged in, their assets engaged in around the DC area in an effort to continue to secure Hollywood projects, which were just covers for drug dealing and Russian operations in the U.S., was massive. So yeah, I think there's definitely a reason to do a lot more investigation around the disinformation schemes, because there were too many people that I dealt with who were just more than happy to just make up weird stories and, say stupid things like, oh, I'm that guy, and are clearly not that guy, or try to say the same person as somebody else, and just try to confuse everyone and want to play dumb word games all day. My dog is digging a hole in the ground. And I think it's just, I'm going to go through these topics really quickly, but if you notice, just to give you some background, Kendrick actually told me personally in that horrible interview I had years ago, which I've detailed in previous episodes, that he basically felt like, or believed that he had come to the U.S. strictly to overthrow the U.S. government. And that he and Cersei and Wilhelm and Patricia and Buffalo Bill and Dan were all going to do that. They really thought they were going to overthrow the U.S. government for Russia. Just so you know that. I want you to understand that, because the story with him is so completely bizarre and frustrated so many people. And I'm especially concerned just because I recently was just down in Charlottesville and had to confront this person again. And I had specifically asked the U.S. government to keep him away from me because he's weird. And I think it was just all about them trying to set up another extortion scheme to steal more money from me, or work, or false labor, whatever. But none of it would work or does work anymore for them, because the U.S. government spent so much time shutting down their ridiculous and bizarre labor trafficking operations in the U.S. And frankly, I welcome the failure of anyone connected to it. Jennifer Lopez lost World of Dance, which she didn't do any real work on. She was an executive producer. She also didn't choreograph or put together the material for her Super Bowl performance, and she never paid any of the people involved. So for somebody like that to have less of a career is an extremely meaningful event, especially because she has relied on her KGB operations and relationships. I know it's hard to imagine, but you're going to hear what I have to say and start to look at some of these actors and actresses, supposed actors and actresses who've always been really sketchy on Hollywood, and you're going to look at the history around the fall of the Soviet Union, the shell organizations that were set up out there, and you'll start to see it yourself. Notably, Madonna has now been in the ICU and extremely ill. Nobody knows exactly why, except that she developed a viral and bacterial infection, and that's sepsis. You have a bacterial infection in the blood that is pretty serious, and she may recover, but is expected to be fairly ill for a while. And another person, Kelsey Ballerina, got hit in the face with a water ball this week, and then Pink had an incident in England when somebody threw on stage a bag of ashes, or tried to hit her with a bag of ashes. It's a really weird story, but what it noted to me was that there's been a huge amount of violence lately in the entertainment industry as some of these shell organizations are falling apart. They're starting to fight with each other. And I'm not sure everyone involved is necessarily in it, but like Kelsey Ballerini is not one that I'm sure she's probably tied to the Russian mafia trafficking issues. Um, I don't think Madonna particularly is based on all the research I did, but what do I know? Anyways, maybe I'll turn to be wrong about that, but I think she's really somebody that, just knowing the history of Michigan and the way she was in the state, I think she's actually a legitimate performer. And she's definitely gotten into some fights with the Russian mafia over the years, so it's kind of strange that she's all of a sudden sick. And they're claiming it's just because she spent a lot of time prepping for her tour. Yeah. You know, sepsis is kind of a weird infection to get just based on prepping for a tour and being exhausted. So, and I need to note for you that, you know, in my experiences, I had such a horrible time dealing with the FBI myself that I couldn't get help from the Arlington police. The Arlington police actually had to be fired. The head of police had to be fired. It took a really long time. It wasn't until like 2020 that a bunch of them got fired. And they had some really nasty people working for the Russian government, Russian mafia embedded in their police force. And I just have to tell you that one thing that did work for me was that I finally got some psychiatrists after the people, the staff at the FBI, and told them that I was going to have them institutionalized and committed if they didn't knock it off. So if you're going through it with them, I would suggest actually looking into the world of healthcare for at least some help. It didn't change my entire scope of my life or get me paid for my work or even save me entirely from violence, but it saved me from much worse things. And it was also just a point that needed to be made. You know, these people thought they were invincible. The Russian mafia thinks they're really invincible because they're holding the U.S. government, and it was time for something to be done differently than just relying on the police who they've constantly manipulated. And this was in the phase where DHS hadn't been entirely set up yet, but DHS had a lot of problems getting set up because the Russians literally kept interfering with the setup of it. Fred would frequently hack them and messed up their operations so people couldn't make reports, and it was just an agency that was constantly under attack in its formation because the FBI and the CIA were far more malleable and usable for the Russians, Russian government, Russian assets, Russian mafia. So I want to note for you too that last month in May, Charlize Theron was doing what was supposed to be a fundraiser for the LGBTQ community, especially transgender people, and she threatened to kill the audience if they didn't give her money. She literally said she was going to kill them if they didn't give her money. Why is Charlize Theron threatening to kill people over money for a fundraiser? That's completely insane. And it's exactly the kind of behavior that nobody wants or needs. And I hesitate to say it's a leftist behavior because I've run into all kinds of people that were mentally ill psychopaths who, in many cases, were tied to the Russian mafia. But that's a very strange comment they make regularly. In fact, I knew a woman at Luther who was Iranian that she's in the Russian mafia, but she constantly would tell people she was going to kill them if they didn't do what she wanted. It was bizarre. Who talks like that? That's a horrible way to talk to people, and it doesn't make me want to give them money. Notably, and finally, the dog is going through. And notably, let's see. Oh, there's another dog. Come on. Come on. Sorry, the dog got really annoyed. Yeah, the dog doesn't like people telling her they have to give her money either. Or they're going to be killed. Or she's going to be killed. She doesn't like that either. My dog protests. So there is an activist, supposed activist at the White House, Rose Montoya, who's a trans activist model, who claims to be, lives as a woman. And I only saw this, I saw the story and thought, I don't think this is worth wasting my time on. But it was a while back. I mean, it was a few weeks ago or maybe even a month ago that she went into the White House and took her top off. Well, that's really disgusting and disrespectful of the president and his wife, okay? Here's the thing. We saw this because of Megyn Kelly because she did a whole show on it, but this person, Rose Montoya, has now put up a video very nastily telling people to leave her alone and just really coming off as someone who's just extremely hostile and overly aggressive. And I think it's really important to note that she has breasts, or he has breasts and a penis, and No one's really sure if he actually went ahead then and exposed his penis as well at the White House, but there was definitely a feeling of there were some women there who were just regular women, maybe lesbians, but they were talking about their mastectomies and surviving breast cancer. And he decided to be really disrespectful and rude to them by beginning to take his top off and acting sexual and totally disregarding and actually making fun of their experience as cancer survivors and breast cancer survivors. So that's what the story is really about. It's about a person being really hostile and rude to women that had survived a health issue, breast cancer. And how somebody can then turn around and make such a hostile video and tell everyone to leave them alone, I would never bother contacting that person because I've had experiences with people that wore costuming and were dangerous and were murderers in my life. And I've also known people that were trans who were actually just performers, like, for example, the lead singer of White Ford Bronco in the DC area, a very nice person. I've actually had conversations with her. She's not somebody who's hostile or weird to women at all, but this person clearly was. And did it in public at the White House and at the expense of the American taxpayers, I guess, and also their security as well. So it's important to note that the issue with this person was literally the hostility and anger towards women. It was the hostility and anger towards women who had actually had breast cancer. Hostility and anger towards women who had had breast cancer. Don't make me say it again. That's the issue. It is the behavioral issue. And thanks to Rose actually spending so much time making videos and getting herself out there, I finally looked her up and realized that she's actually the wife of a Hollywood executive. And for whatever reason is just heavily photoshopped in a lot of their pictures and also lives under another alias name. But I'm 100% sure it's the same person and it's the person's current wife. And her husband is an extremist and Russian. So that would explain the behaviors and attitudes. And I hope you're understanding the sort of matrix of attitudes that I'm putting together for you and behaviors because it's really important to understand. And that's all the show is really about today. So happy 4th of July. I don't really have a song for you today. I thought I'd sing a little bit of sort of an old country tune, but I think I'm going to do Oh my darling, oh my darling, oh my darling Clementine, you were lost and well forgotten, oh my darling Clementine. Oh my darling, oh my darling, oh my darling Clementine, you were lost and forgotten, but now you're found, my darling Clementine. Happy 4th of July weekend.